record to my computer. Okay, so thank you all for coming. I'm going to pull up some notes. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk for 5 or 6 minutes on the origin of campfires, the indigenous social technology, the yarn that it is inspired by, a little bit on the history of campfires, and then a little bit about this current experiment for inviting in the Great Lakes Basin bioregions to try to build energy, coherence, help relationships to form that might not otherwise form. And then we're just going to launch into conversation and the invisible structures that the campfire provides. So as far as the origin of campfires, it all started 3 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long, in the Community Regenerators Training Program. That's when I first landed into ER. It was like the first 2 months of Earth Regenerators. I was really intrigued by this idea of community regeneration. I'd come from landscape regeneration. This was kind of a new idea to me, that there could be like a design science, if you will, to regenerating community. At the same time, I was reading the book Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta. I don't know how many people have read that book. I can't recommend it enough. And in that book, I heard about the indigenous social technology of the yarn. And the way that I interpreted it is it was born out of the adaptive pressures, or in part born out of the adaptive pressures of living in the continent of Australia. I don't know how much you guys know about Australia, but it's a really challenging place to live. I'm sure you've heard something about it. The outback, it has its reputation, but there's no continents in the middle of the country. So salt does not shed off of the continent. Salt gathers. And moisture, what happens is this lens of moisture pushes the salt down. And if there are poor techniques or strategies in managing the landscape, that salt layer is just ready to pop up. If water sheds away, or if something else happens, the ecosystems can collapse very quickly. Additional challenges are it's incredibly dry given where it is, its latitude. And they're really, really hot winds. So whatever moisture it does receive, if it doesn't infiltrate, it evaporates immediately. And so despite all of that, we have these cultures that persisted, that evolved with changing contexts over tens of thousands of years in relative abundance. And they also were able to develop a continental scale culture. And forms of communication. So amazing, right? I mean, there were a number of social technologies, cultural traditions that enabled them to adapt and to, as I said, to thrive in relative abundance for a very, very, very long time, through deep time. And one of those was the yarn. And in the book Sand Talk, Tyson Yunkaporta says that yarns are a modality that arose out of distributed governance in an attempt to form distributed cognition. He says that a yarn aims to build the big picture and make accurate predictions moving forward so that a group can make plans that make sense in the real world. Every person's story must be heard because the truth exists in the aggregate of all stories. Even the outliers are important to hear, end quote. Tyson says really interesting things about diversity. And I think that last little bit alludes to why. Next, the history of campfire. So it was with this spirit of the yarn that we said about, hey, Meaty, I'm just giving a little preamble explaining campfires. So it was with the inspiration of the yarn that we set about exploring and adapting it to our context, very, very different context, a group of people in a virtual space distributed across the planet who care deeply about Earth regeneration, very, very different context. But nonetheless, we met several times a week, talking about things like adaptation, talking about culture, talking a lot about indigenous ways of being. And over, that first year or two, really deep relationships formed, and an invisible structure started to take shape, and a shared understanding of what it was we were doing together really started to take shape as well. And the subtle value or functions of this social technology started to become apparent. And I think they were most understood by the people who had been doing it the longest, which is really interesting. And so over the last year, I've kind of stepped away from campfires for the most part. I had a bit of Zoom fatigue, some health challenges, and I was focusing on some other things, and a small group of dedicated, what I call firekeepers, carried the process forward in bioregional catalysts. I'm forever grateful for that. They still go Thursday evenings and Sunday mornings in the bioregional catalysts. Those are the times in North America anyway. And I hope to continue to host them from time to time in different contexts and with new people. And that brings me to this current experiment that we're running, where over the next 6 sessions, Wednesday and Saturday for the next 3 weeks in Campfire Talks, I'm going to host campfires and invite people in from the Great Lakes Basin to try to build energy, build enthusiasm, build coherence, be here for questions to be answered, and provide a space where new relationships can be formed and where topics can arise that otherwise wouldn't have a place for them to arise. Just a little bit on the logistics, the details, the structure, so much as there is one. It's really important, or I found it to be really important, to have small group sizes, like 6 to 8 people. That way the dialogue remains coherent. When there's a lot of people, it tends to be that like somebody has an idea that they hold for a little while, they introduce it, and it takes the dialogue over here. And when you look at the topology of the dialogue at the end, it's sort of all over the place. When there's fewer people, it seems to maintain a higher degree of continuity in my experience. And also you get to know people better. After spending an hour and a half with 6 people or an hour with 6 people, feel like you know them. If you spend that amount of time with 12, you're just kind of alone in the crowd, at least in my experience. That's how I feel. So in these next 6 sessions, if we get to group sizes that are bigger than 8, my plan is to break it up into smaller conversations, use breakout rooms, and then let the conversations breathe for like an hour, and then come back together near the end to see if to share the important topics that arose. And it's all an experiment. We haven't done that really before, so we'll see how that goes. And with that, I would love to stop talking. And yeah, this is great. Pamela, Meaty, the 2 people who are here who have been in campfires for a long time, is there anything that you would like to add before we move on? And we'll do check-ins after.
No, just watch out what you press in reactions. I meant to just give you a thumbs up, Benji. I really enjoyed what you were saying, and I put up my hand instead. But yeah, it's great to see people coming in, and this experiment is really interesting to me because I've lost ground, and I'm sure that I'm going to catch up with a lot of stuff here. So thanks.
Sweet. Meaty, is there anything you'd like to add as a longtime firekeeper?
Just hello. It's lovely to see some of my favorite people, newcomers and older comers. I feel connected to Bennett, Richard, and Preston already in very different ways. And yeah, Pamela and I have walked the path together a longish while. And you two, Pamela and Benji, even slightly longer than me and Earth Regenerators. So lovely to be here with a mix of older and newer faces. Thank you. And I love the campfire because it appeals to my right brain being. It's about storytelling, it's about sitting together, it's about discovering what is it that's trying to emerge around the fire as we sit together and chat. I love the process flow of that. Thank you.
Great additions. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, maybe in order to get us going to build some energy, we could just do check-ins and just, I don't know, share how you're feeling or something that's really present for you, something you've been thinking about, maybe you haven't had a chance to share with others. And we'll go around, and by the time we end, maybe we'll have some sense of where the conversation wants to start. And with that, does anybody want to start with check-ins?
Well, I'm happy to start because my words for the morning would be, I'm arriving in a somewhat unstable place, woken at 2 o'clock by an earthquake and several aftershocks off the coast of Malibu, coming on the tracks of 25 people dead in several mass shootings across the state in the last few days, which is coming so soon in the wake of the flooding and the rock slides and the mud flows. So it feels that California is shaking at the moment, literally and metaphorically. I felt the violence in the air for quite a while now. I've spoken to it before in Campfire, I think. It feels the more important to hold my loved ones close and to look for the green shoots and the positive amidst the challenging. So that's me. Anyone want to pick up from there?
Sure, I'll go. I've actually been quite disconnected from Toronto lately. It's hard to say that when you're in the middle of it all, but in fact, I only just discovered through a conversation with Dan on here a couple of days ago about how much there's been some tense issues unfolding in Toronto as well. I don't know how much it is an overall pattern, or if it's just some loose incidences that happen to have a bit of overlap of appearance. I'm not sure. My personal situation has just been so many irons in the fire, as they used to say. So there's all the pieces of the Earth Regenerator stuff here that we're plotting forward with, and then as things just jump into my mind, I'm reaching out to whomever I can think of. And so this morning, I think another 8 people I sent emails to, reached out to on LinkedIn, finally found some more connections on the Indigenous aspects that I think we could build some really good relations into with Earth Regenerators here in the Toronto area. So I reached out and I'm starting to get a little bit of feedback on those. And then we're in the process of trying to prepare to sell our house. So I've been having contractors over, and I've been trying to get things ready to stage. And so there's just so much unfolding that it's hard to actually pay attention to everything that's happening at the moment. So very nice to slow down for a few minutes and dig a little deeper into this group of what are becoming friends. I'm liking that a lot right now. So I toss it out to whomever wants to speak next.
Richard.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, lovely to be with you here, and it's my first experience of Campfire, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing the fire with you all. Yeah, it's been I'm coming in from a very busy start to the day, and in my my paid work as a neuropsychologist, I had a new client to see first thing, and it was a very busy start. And when I got home, I realized I hadn't finished my breakfast. It was still sat on the table. I had no recollection of that. And yeah, so my breakfast became my lunch. Yeah, so I'm glad to slow things down now. And it's been a kind of a busy week. David Sloan Wilson from ProSocial is in the UK. Yeah, I'm hoping to catalyze things in the UK, and I'd arranged for him to come and meet with the community group that I'm part of on Sunday, and then just found out yesterday the cafe where we were going to meet, which is the only place to eat in the village, was closed, with the staff sounding as though they're ill with COVID. So I've had to kind of rearrange things and try and find something else. And actually, I've managed to get the village hall, which was supposed to be booked, but someone hadn't confirmed. So yeah, so that's all been changing around, and actually that was quite stressful. But it feels as though it's coming together. Something has emerged, and the community group is all pitching in to help and being really collaborative. So yeah, that's cool how that's emerging. And also just found out that we've just won the Community Champions Award with the local council as well, which the member of local councillor who joins our meetings, nominated us for last year. So yeah, so there's that all coming together, and with David coming as well to find out more about our group. So yeah, that's where I'm coming into it today.
Quick question, Preston. You may have said, but I didn't catch it. Where are you exactly? What's your village?
You mean Richard?
Yeah, Richard, yes.
Just to the west of Reading, it's called Purley-on-Thames. Yeah, it's about 30 miles west of London.
And I'm also posting in the chat a conversation with David Sloan Wilson that he hosted recently with two other scientists broadly on the topic of pro-social and how evolutionary science can inform the way that we understand it. And it's dense and it's really interesting. It's a two-parter, and I highly recommend it. Joe sent it to me, so I'll post that in the chat as well. And Pamela Bennett, would you guys like to check in? Either one of you?
Yeah, I can go.
Bennett.
Yeah, so I've just been reeling. I got hit with a bunch of stuff at the same time. Started not being able to sleep, which is fun. And yeah, just like a bunch of tumultuousness, hence my recent absence from Earth Regenerator spaces. But I think it's on the downslope from it, as it were. And yeah, trying to justify and like ratchet up the motivation to quit this job that really sucks so I can focus on stuff that's more important. But I have been getting a windfall of compost lately, so it's kind of this like, yeah, push and pull, but I'm sure it'll become more clear over the next few days. Yeah, I just been trying to rest, and then my mind not being too happy about that, and then my body not being sure how to respond to that. But yeah, overall, I think I'm out of the worst of it and feeling ready to get back to the important stuff.
Pamela.
Yeah, thanks. It sounds like there's different kinds of earthquakes going around, a lot of things that are changing, moving pieces, and difficulty in finding a stable standing point, and I can throw my hat into that ring as well. Also, as an alumni of the Great Lakes region, I'm kind of interested in how that conversation unfolds as we go. But as people are speaking too, I'm aware of just how much ground here that I have lost by sort of being off in my own this bioregion, and exploring what I need to do within the terms of my own recovery, which is a problematic word in itself, or it might be better to use the word regeneration. Locally, one of the things that's being really notable and talked about by people who have long experience here is the high water, the duration and extent of the king tide over this region. Unfortunately, we've not had storms. Hi, Chad. Good to see your Zoom face. Whoa, hey, Chad. Good to see you. And yeah, I really enjoyed your description of campfires, Benji. I really feel like it's a reboot, and I look forward to having that heard by more people who are going into campfires, but also just to hear it again as a long campfire, attendee and keeper. It's good to get that framework that you put together articulated so clearly, and it was my opening into the relationality of earth regenerators And that relationship was not just between people, but also to understanding some of the deeper concepts that are underpinning what it is we're doing here, as articulated by people who were living them in their lives in different ways. And that really gave skin to some of these abstractions that were really, it was really helpful. And on that note, I'm going to pass to Chad. Love the hat.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wish that I heard the first part of the conversation here, but I'm getting the gist here. I'm Benji, so I just messaged you here. And I can just read back basically what I wrote Benji, which is to say that I've been looking for a place to bring in my local friends and colleagues into the conversation and some of the around the Great Lakes. And this seems like it could be an appropriate place to do it in order to sort of orient before getting into the more gritty, like organizational type stuff and the other weekly meetings. What else to say? Just here trying to learn a flute. That says it all. Yeah.
It's a perfect hat for learning the flute.
Oh, thank you. It's a snowy day too.
And where is here now, Chad? Are you?
I'm in Michigan. Yeah.
Music and fire. This sounds wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, if anybody, I don't want to put Chad on the spot, but if anybody ever felt inclined to play some music here, around the campfire, it would be appropriate. Just throwing it out there.
We had a project incubator meeting last night where Trisha and Iris enthralled us with their adventures in the OSA. And just before the meeting, Trisha sent me a telegram saying any chance we could play, and she named her favorite musician woman singer from Costa Rica. And my beloved, who is just an ace at anything musical, it's his life after all, managed to send me a download of her. And it was just such a beautiful way. Pamela, you were with us. It just reminds me how playing music at the start of a Zoom meeting brings us in a completely different energy and space. So that was a beautiful reminder. So even if we don't have musicians in the room, although we've got Chad here, we can always bring in some music. Which interests me, are there particular musical flavors, traditional musical flavors in the Great Lakes region?
Well, I think that would be a question for Preston or Chad to answer. Either you have any perspective on that? I mean, Detroit's a big music city.
I'm hoping Chad can add maybe a little bit more to this. My academic background is biological anthropology and goes back much, much further in time than anything with regards to Turtle Island. But yeah, that's that grand divide between sectors of study, as academia likes to do, where we specialize to a point where it becomes irrelevant to almost anybody but to a few key people in the world. So yeah, my knowledge of the arts of this area, music in particular, is definitely, I'd say it's pretty much zero.
Yeah, I just want to bring in the biological anthropology. And it's interesting that it doesn't extend to music, because you would think that would be such an important part of the functioning of the organism. But yeah, interesting that you say that.
Yeah,
It's funny that you say that, Pamela, 'cause it's something that struck me many times, and I've like spent a lot of time thinking about this, particularly because of the passions, the emotions, the biological responses to musical frameworks. And I think, if I understand correctly, we are the only ape that recognizes emotionality to music. And so, sort of in the framework of community here, that sort of concept of oneness and relation, I think there is probably vast research that could be done if there isn't anybody doing it in this framework. Sorry, Chad, I cut you off.
That's actually good because it allowed space for another thought to come to mind. So I actually remember reading an article recently about musical artifacts from many tens of thousands of years ago, which from sort of a practical standpoint might seem like too early in technological development. Like, you know, there are other practical things to be doing, like building shelters and but music goes way back. And so even some of the scales that we play today were found in like ancient bone flutes. Like the perfect fourths and fifths are right in there, like tens of thousands of years before music theory. So yeah, I was thinking about the Great Lakes, and yeah, I mean, so Detroit, of course, is home of techno music. I was just talking to Mark here, who met Benji, and he's talking about having friends who worked in recording studios, like in Motown days and all that stuff. And the Great Lakes itself is a trade region, right? So I imagine there are many different musical cultures, but one thing that music does is to bring together people. Often like a pidgin language too, because you don't need words to understand it. So it's a good place of fusion. And I think, like New Orleans is similarly a rich hybrid of cultures and musical traditions, and it's also located on a trade route. So I don't know more specifics, but now my curiosity's piqued. Yeah.
I think it's funny this has kind of come up because my primary association with Michigan is going out there to go to a music festival for the last 10 years. So that's like my main drive for having any sort of connection to the region, but I've been able to extend it a little bit, got up to the UP one time after the event, and yeah, it's like funny frame of reference.
And where I live, it's very close to Reading, and Reading, is a big trade route. It's got the confluence of two rivers, the River Thames and also the River Kennet, which allowed settlement there originally. And it has Reading Festival, which is known throughout the world for the longest standing festival of its type. I've been once, but I don't need to go because I live so close. I can listen to the music in my back garden. Red Hot Chili Peppers in my back garden is great.
That reminds me of when we lived in Austin and we didn't need to go to the Rolling Stones, and it sounded like they were in our backyard. It's so interesting, the whole music piece to me. I in a previous lifetime, in the end of the 20th century, I was living in Corsica and involved every September in hosting a music festival of polyphonic music from all around the world. And the thing that I retain as a memory is the striking difference between indigenous music and classical music. I can remember one year we had the Tuvans, which is a republic next to Mongolia, and they do that throat music. I don't know if you've heard Mongolian or the steppes music, which is this extraordinary singing of two notes at the same time. It's quite remarkable and unique. And the Tuvans were, it was like Genghis Khan had ridden in from the steppes. Actually, they had their musical instruments with horses on the shafts, and just a whole way of being. And the contrast was a group of 8 young men called Henry's 8 from Oxford University, who came with their sheet music and their precision and their very carefully modulated harmonies. And what was so interesting was even outside the concerts, they really had no idea how to relate to the other 90 or so people in the concert. We used to have at midnight, the real concerts began at midnight after the evening concerts were over, when all of the musicians and the technicians and the festival organizers came together, and we'd eat inside in this tiny 13th century powder house if the weather was bad, or we'd eat out on the ramparts looking out over the bay and across to the mountains if the weather was good. And they were literally, Henry's 8 were fish out of water the whole of the week. And it was so striking that by, we had people from literally all over the world. We had people from Cuba, we had people from Alaska, we had people from South Africa. So many different musical traditions. We had women from the First Nations people of the Americas, discovering that women from Bulgaria had literally the same musical melodies in their songs and their traditions. And in the midst of this group from Oxford University brought their sheet music, and I have to say, they sang exquisitely. But in terms of human relating, they were totally at sea. Pamela, you've got a yarn to tell.
A few words to throw in the stream, but what interests me is the scaling up. So you've got the Great Lakes region, and now you're talking about festivals, and you're talking about these large musical events, and they're sort of scaled up representations of the human impulse to connect through sound. And in lieu of any external instrument, we have our bodies. And so there's extraordinary music that has come out of cultures just using like stomping of feet or singing, sound, chant, all of that kind of, and then movement, of course. How do you separate dance or performance in a way from the sounds that are being presented? But when I think of, when I feel music, needs for words like, positivity or optimism or anything like that get blown entirely out of the water, because it's so elemental to being human to have that, so that things can be stripped away, stripped down, and that is the core of our being and our capacity that's demonstrated all the time. And so one of the things that's really encouraging I think I didn't experience it in Ontario when I was there, but I heard stories of the kitchen table. And on the West Coast, my highest musical moments were around the kitchen table. And you hear that more and more about any place that's rural, and probably nests of it in urban situations too. But the kitchen table is one of the most dynamic concert halls that you can be in the modern world. Because all of those things come, that's just what human beings do. We make music, we make connection through music, we make sound, we dance. It's very exciting. Yeah, Preston.
Yeah, it's bringing me back around to thinking a bit about, and I don't have extensive knowledge of it, but the history of the Great Lakes, sort of prior to and through that shift of colonization, where we have, I think the dish with one spoon goes back to somewhere around 1100 AD, ceremonies and interrelations of different nations that were here. And all aspects of those larger scale relationships between vast communities are always based around ceremony and music and processes that need to be revisited from time to time. And so even in recent times with the some of the conflicts that have been happening, where a lot of the First Nations issues have been coming to the forefront, they're talking about, polishing the covenants. They're talking about revisiting these relationships. And it's the colonialist framework that has forgotten about these aspects of relationship that pre-existed anybody of European backgrounds being in this vicinity. So maybe there's opportunity in that to, from music through emotions, through all that being tapped into to build out these relationships in a new way again.
It's so interesting. I've just done a quick Google, and one of the themes that comes up related to the Great Lakes is music and the maritime music and traditional songs of shipwrecks and boats, and just interest. I mean, as soon as I hear that, I have a different image of the Great Lakes. I'm drawn into, my goodness, those lakes. I think of a lake like the lakes of my childhood. I think of a lake like the lakes of California, where I, go out on a boat with my friends sometimes. And suddenly I'm realizing that these are immense places that have shipwrecks, like my, ancestral origins who were drowned off the coast of Wales in shipwrecks. And it's just like I'm in a different world all of a sudden.
It is it is so interesting. Yeah, I sorry, I'm making some tea, so I was off camera. But I heard recently that people in Cleveland, they consider their city to be a coastal city. And you can actually a ship can travel from Europe to Cleveland faster than it can to Baltimore. I'm guessing because there's backup in the harbor, and it's faster to take the canal directly to Cleveland. So these are, I mean, they're seas, they're inland seas, really. And it is interesting when those of us from other regions hear the Great Lakes, we don't really have that sort of that the image of the vastness of them isn't conjured up for me until I drove below Lake Erie and Lake Ontario this summer on the way to Maine, and I just kept going and going and going, and I was underneath those lakes for so long. I'm like, wow, they're enormous. They're truly enormous. Yeah. So much of the fresh water of the entire planet is held in those lakes. They're important.
Does anyone know how much of that fresh water is potable? Like, what's the state of it?
There is a really interesting documentary that somebody in the Great Lakes Basin bioregions pointed to the Erie situation. The water quality of Lake Erie is poor, and it's actually gotten better, but it's really bad. And maybe I'm sure Chad and Preston can speak more to it, but they're really quite polluted. Yeah, it's sad.
Zoe's joined us. Hi, Zoe.
Hey, Zoe.
Hi everyone.
She's just
Hi,
along the
Zoe.
road from you, Richard, in Bristol.
Oh, cool. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, where are you from, Richard?
Near Reading.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how far that is. I've never been to Reading actually. Is that an hour or so from Bristol? I'm not really
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, about an hour to Bristol.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's nice to sort of interact with fellow people from the UK as well. Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, there are a few of us around on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone in the middle, just south of Swindon, Steve Litchfield, and Irvie in London, and yeah, some other people as well. I can't quite bring to mind at the moment.
Yeah. I know.
Sarah Woodrow is up in Cambridge. She's our culture centre MC. She's someone you should connect in with as well.
Cool. Yeah, and of course, yeah, Mila and Norfolk.
It's nice to know that there are other people out there.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
aren't just sort of vacant walking around, not really knowing what's going on. Although I suppose, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty ignorant to a lot of what's going on. I feel like I'm just literally scratching the surface. But I know for me that it's more of an inner feeling where things just don't feel right, and I just try and follow that really at the moment.
You mean with regards to the big predicament?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's just been going on for so long as well. But it's really just all, I guess, coming to the surface now because it's becoming more of an urgent problem. But I think for me, what I'm getting troubled with is that I feel like I'm quite attached to a certain outcome, and none of us really know what's going to happen. And I feel like sometimes there's so much resistance and frustration building up inside of me, and that's actually not helpful. So I think it's trying to find a balance, almost it's like accepting what's happening, but doing something proactive in your own sphere, in your own life to try and kind of improve things and get other people on board. That's what I'm sort of getting from this. I don't know if that makes sense to other people.
It does. I think we all have our own ways of arriving into this and making sense of why it's a good thing to do. And one thing that that came up for me when you were first speaking is from the interview that I linked to about 20-30 minutes ago with David Sloan Wilson. He said something really interesting with regards to this scientific inquiry around a global form of cooperation that is worth hoping for. He says it's certainly not inevitable, and we should all feel a lot of suspense right now. And so that really stuck with me. And maybe I'll leave it at that because I saw Pamela reaching for the mute button right as I started to talk, and maybe she can carry on from there or bring something
Even
else
though
on.
Benji, I was thinking this is what I was going to do was refer to your opening at this of the campfire. And welcome, Zoe, and welcome to your confusion, and welcome to all of the things that you were saying and are concerned about. And one of the delightful things about Campfire, which Benji set up, and do listen to his introduction when he posts it, is that this is a really good place for finding the others and for exploring exactly those kinds of concerns that you brought up. And that's all I was going to say. But do listen to Benji's opener, because I think Campfires is an excellent place to pop into to touch ground, figuratively with like-minded people, like-hearted people.
And how appropriate given the spontaneity and and trickster nature of campfires that with the intent of connecting people from the Great Lakes, we've actually connected 2 people in the UK. So go
Yeah.
figure.
Absolutely. And there is someone else in Bristol as well. I can't remember their name at the moment. So yeah, I'll post that in the chat when I remember.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would be really helpful actually, because it's really good to know that there, as I said, I'm repeating myself now, but it's really good to know there are other people out there that we can connect with, because I think in order to kind of like for this to spread out to the wider population, I think it is about like that pro-social, like the emphasis on the pro-social. I think that is like fundamentally really important, because I'm trying to explain what I'm trying to say, but if you come at people with this information in a certain way, it can cause resistance if people aren't ready to hear it. And I think it's about like forming those like pro-social relationships with people, so people feel they don't feel pressured, but they feel open to talk to each other and to relate on this topic. So yeah, basically, I think it's really good to be linking up with others.
Zoe, I was actually thinking of you last night when I was hosting a session with someone called Iris Neckerman, who is actually in Costa Rica in the Osa Peninsula. But I think she's a really very, very interesting example of someone who has kind of stepped out across the world from her home in the Netherlands and headed out to Costa Rica, partly, as she said last night, to kind of join and travel with friends that she'd been on a course with. And she arrived in Costa Rica and met up with Trisha, who's leading a beautiful on-ground project in the Osa Peninsula. And she's just kind of stepped out as a volunteer into doing this regenerative work on the ground with Trisha and in that community. And I just love her courage and her can-do-ness. And I actually thought to put the 2 of you in touch. So I'll put a message to you both in the. I mentioned it to Iris, who said she'd love to connect with you, and I'll put a message to you both in the chat in Earth Regenerators, if that would work with you, if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Yeah, if you could connect me with her, that would be amazing. Because yeah, I just keep thinking that I just want to like leave this life behind and just start all over again, like how it should be. Yeah, I feel so much drive to do something. Almost like sometimes it's like, as I said before, it's almost like too much, like too much energy, and it's almost like fighting, it's like internally like fighting with myself, because I feel like I can't actually do anything right now. Like obviously there's little things that I can do, but it's not so much on the I want to feel like I'm making a difference. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, if you could connect me with her, that would be amazing. Thank you.
I actually find this to be a great opportunity to re-invoke the Great Lakes, because I started writing an article a couple days ago that I'll probably be publishing today or tomorrow on the Great Lakes Basin conversations that Jonathan Cloud has been hosting, because I think that they're revealing something really important, and Zoe's kind of echoing this as well, and that is that there are so many people standing by. There's so much energy and potential that just wants to find the pathways, the means to contribute, wants to find the coherence, wants to find the others, wants to be a part of processes that are bringing this bioregional vision to life. Jonathan Cloud is a great facilitator. He's really been doing a fantastic job. He's been setting context. in a beautiful way so that the group comes together within the bioregional frame. But the most important thing that he's done in my mind, in my estimation, is just invite people and hold space. And the energy has been, I think it was Preston and I were chatting a little bit in DMs about how it has a completely different feel than the other ER conversations we've been a part of. I feel a certain like increase in responsibility. Like this is there's something real that's being born here. And whatever I say, I want to have, a positive impact to actually contribute to this thing that's emerging. And I find myself like thinking like, well, no, I don't really have anything to add. I'll just wait. Like I feel that level of significance. Whereas in other places in ER, a little bit more free and open and sort of exploratory and spontaneous, just as a way to sort of communicate the feel of it. I don't know if Preston or Chad, if you'd like to say anything else about those calls, but I'm just really so excited to see where all this goes, because we haven't even, Joe and Penny haven't even landed, and it just seems like the cluster of bioregions is forming.
Just to say, Zoe and I connected in thanks to Jonathan in a right livelihood session on Earth regenerators.
Yeah, he's doing a lot.
Yeah,
Preston.
that was really good. That was really good, that webinar. But I think the next one is at like 1 a.m. in the UK or something. So I think I'll have to miss that one. But that was really interesting. It's like it's just difficult knowing where to start with everything, how to get going, get it off the ground. I think that's one of the main sort of challenges, really. I'm finding, because I don't know. I have some savings. I'm just thinking, should I just go and buy some land somewhere? I don't know, but then I don't know where to start, and I don't know. We'll see what happens, but.
Well, there's certainly, I think, a lot of ideas that this group could explore as far as how you might begin. But I'm curious if Preston would like to take it from here, since I did see his hand a moment ago.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts there. I know Jonathan, I'm not sure if it's with the Great bioregional stuff or with Right Livelihood, but he was actually adjusting some of his schedules to try to make it a little more convenient for our European participants to be a part of some of those journeys as well. I would think if anybody wanted to reach out in those sort of circumstances, it would give the host a better feel for what might be an opportunity, or even just to have an exchange back and forth and link people together. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. As for the Great Lakes call, it is fascinating. I think we started off with 10 or 12 when it began about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I think this last two have been 16 and 21. So there's been a lot of people. A lot of people are just being invited by word of mouth. So 2, 3, 4 people show up because one other person had come in. At the moment, I'm finding it very institutional, but that's just my own little issue with aspects of hierarchy and authority and trust issues. But that's only something I'm personally bringing to it. That is my own little issue to kind of to work through. But I'm actually really curious, because the whole group of groups thing, which I think is where Benji wants to take a catalyst here, I think it's probably going to have to start coming together, just because if you start getting 20, 25, 30 people showing up to events, it gets harder and harder to everybody to have a voice. And in these conversations, everybody wants to speak. In fact, it's hard to get people to slow down. There's so much energy around, oh wow, something is coming that makes sense, and that there's a pathway, and what about this, what about that? It's very explosive, kind of one thing to the next unfolding. I mean, honestly, the last time I threw out a piece of a puzzle in the last 1 minute of the conversation, which was totally unfair, but it's something that just occurred to me in that moment and seemed inappropriate to leave out at the same time. So it's a very volatile place for concepts and growth and burgeoning, and it's fascinating, I find.
Chad, yeah. Over to you. And welcome, Claire.
Hi, Claire. Yeah, I've actually spent a good part of Monday afternoon getting up to speed on the Great Lakes conversation and reading some posts that I hadn't yet read, and bookmarking some videos. I've been part of some, but not all of the those calls, mostly as a listener. And I think it's also fascinating just to see what's coming together there. So in terms of the feeling tone of the space, it's like this. I feel like this feeling of like these battle-tested veterans coming in and seeing new life, and with the kind of saltiness, but with saltiness sans bitterness, seeing where it's going to go forward. So that's the flavor for me. I'm sort of interested in it from their perspective, because I don't just getting to know most of the people in the room there, and it's not, I don't see it as an ER space per se. It's facilitated by ER, which I think is sort of, or bioregional activators, right? So it's like a case study in activation. I guess all this is, right, as part of the learning centers, right? But I'm curious to like what ER can bring in, and I see that as being kind of like a spirit, or some sort of guide quality to it. And yeah, but I'd be curious to see what other folks who are coming from other spaces in ecoregions and experience is why they're being drawn into that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, meaty.
I have some thoughts about that, but I wonder if Claire wants to say hi. It's so good to see you, Claire. Did you want to take a minute or so to tell us how you're arriving?
Oh, thanks, Mitty. Yeah, apologies for being late. I think I got my timing muddled up, and I think I'm a little discombobulated going between Cowichan and Victoria. Happens right now. Yeah, I think that the what, just following on what Chad was saying, I'm trying to sort of thinking, when you don't have necessarily a network of relationships that exist yet, they're people coming together because they have common interests. Yeah, it takes a little while for that that culture to develop. And I'm wondering, what I would wonder, and just putting this into that, is what is the impact of an earth regenerator space having on helping to sort of bring that pro-social piece in. I must admit that there have been some meetings where I have felt very much that sort of a group of people coming together, bringing in sometimes not necessarily very pro-social ways. They're not being objectionable, but they're just it takes a little while being in a community where you're seeing how things operate differently. So anyway, just putting that in there, and I'm really happy to just listen. Thanks, Mitty.
Lovely. Well, the thought that came up in me, and the sense that came up in me as I listened to you, Preston, and following on from Benji's comments, I think what Jonathan is doing is something quite remarkable, actually. And I have this sense that in certain meetings in ER, I'm looking inward. I'm with my kind of very much with my fellow ER people, maybe welcoming new people into ER. And looking, for example, with Zoe, looking at ways, how can we help Zoe plug in with her others? And that's actually, in a sense, what I was doing last night when I was talking with Iris. In other meetings, and I felt it most strongly so far with the Great Lakes meeting, the only one that I've been able to attend so far. No, two actually, two different sorts. One but hosted by Benji, one by Jonathan. I felt I'm in this ER space, looking outward, holding space for others who may or may not become ER members, but for whom we can serve in the moment. Who knows where it will go? But it's this sense of what's emerged, I think, with bioregional activators, and with you, Benji, holding this very interesting space across the membranes of the two kind of groups as they've constituted themselves, is this sense of sometimes I'm looking in and sometimes I'm looking out. And then other times I'm actually, it doesn't matter which space I'm in, like Pamela named right at the beginning with your check-in. Sometimes the bioregion has become really MIDI because something has gone on that has triggered some part of me that needs my inner contemplation and attention and maybe some healing, some inner process work, or some seeking support from somebody else to talk through an issue. But so it's like I'm in these different, well, who is it that was speaking to the Russian dolls? I think it was Kath at Governance Jam recently, speaking to the Russian dolls metaphor. And I'm finding ER is this holding space in the middle that is sometimes looking in on itself and its own processes, and other times it's facing outward to this wider world. And that feels really, really good. It's also how I see what's going on with Vivero. Vivero has been so difficult to articulate because from its original simple, let's invite people across the board in Earth Regenerators to contribute a little bit monthly so that we can gather a pool and we can spread the giving, and then use that pool to support specific people and projects. But at the same time, Vivero has this capacity that stretches way beyond Earth Regenerators, that makes it makes the prototype that we're working on in ER with Vivero have huge potential for other communities across internet, in bioregions. The mechanism, the platforms can become a source for giving and receiving within bioregions, within locations. So it's this inward outward theme that I've been pursuing lately, and getting clear myself in the moment, which Russian doll am I in? You know, is part of the fascination, and also sometimes a bit of a challenge, because I can find myself not quite clear which is the level in which I'm functioning. Thank you.
That's really interesting. I think that what Preston was referencing earlier about this inquiry into operating as groups of groups. I mean, the sentiment that you just named might be how it feels. It might be, you know, am I looking inward? Am I looking outward? When I'm looking inward, I'm operating in my main group, the group of people that I interact with the most, that are hopefully in close proximity, are bioregional, we're meeting on the ground, and then as we interact with others, with the cluster of bioregions, with the continental scale, it's going to have this feeling of looking outward. Yeah, that's fun to name it like that. It resonates with me and how I've experienced it as well. Yeah, hopefully we become pretty familiar with it. That's the goal. Claire, anything that's coming up for you since we haven't heard from you much?
Well, maybe I don't, I feel a little bit disruptive to the flow because I haven't participated in this. But I have to say something pretty exciting happened yesterday that I would really like to just mention was that so the group that I've worked with in Victoria, I'm still on the board of, and we've just had the mayor used to be, so Victoria's divided into multiple municipalities, and Saanich is one of the biggest that I'm in. And so the mayor wasn't re-elected, but he was very, very, he did a lot to try and basically embrace, they called it One Planet Living, but really it started out around bioregional thinking. And that is a lot of what the work was that we were trying to do. And they're a very effective, connected group of people, but they were trying to, from a fairly sort of high level, had gone and connected with several of the local universities, and got all of the various deans to come and say that they really wanted to have this conversation. And so then as they were talking about it, and it was kind of coming from a little bit more of a top-down way of talking, and we were sort of, I was having a hard time even sort of supporting it, just because that's been my issue all along. It's come from a much more top-down way of doing it. And so I was able to start telling them again, and I have told them about what I was doing in Cowichan, but and then was able to refer to them to what was going on in Bioregions, and using those sort of like how we start to look at bioregional learning and looking at story of place and mapping. And as I started to kind of describe the various components, right away, it became clear that they could see a model that was different from their own and yet created the pathways through. And so it just felt super exciting. Fred, the guy who was the mayor, is going to come up to the Saturday all-day workshop we're doing up in Cowichan. It's not a workshop, it's just the Stone Soup gathering. Yeah, it just feels, I mean, all of a sudden it was like light bulbs were going off. And yeah, feels like there's a shift, and certainly Fred brings a different energy. He kind of understands that top-down attitude isn't going to work. Doesn't matter how much I tried to sort of bring that up. Trevor would run sort of a bit roughshod over that, but he's listening to Fred because, I don't know, there's a different dynamic in the room. So I feel that things could shift in that department. I'm just happy to have strong examples that actually carry a lot of weight, because they're actually being they're actualized, and we can speak to it. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up because it feels pretty exciting. So yeah.
That is so great. And I'm realizing how much I'm talking as well, but I wanted to try to loop in another thread that was untied, and that was Zoe's inquiry into what it is that she can do. And maybe you provide a great example to look to places like Barichara, to look to places elsewhere, the Bioregional Learning Center, all of these examples of these processes that we talk so much about that have actually had time to mature a bit, that are showing, that are demonstrating, that are offering stories that we can try to embody to sense into what exactly all this means. The Bioregional Learning Center, the story of place, landscape partnerships, how does pro-social fit into all of this? Like, just understanding how it all fits together and seeing how it's unfolded and sharing that with our friends, our family. You know, if we're feeling really bold, you know, sharing it more broadly in our communities. I think that's a great way to start, because so much of this, excuse me, so much of this is understanding it ourselves. You know, I have been having these conversations for 3 years, and I can't believe how much I still learn all the time. And frankly, I learn the most when I hear about bioregions, when I hear about these examples that have, you know, really been weaving together and seeing the bioregional vision for a period of time. And I think they're really important. Yeah. So thank you for that, Claire. Yeah, that was great. Meaty. I've talked enough.
Well, I want to riff exactly on what you said, Benji, because part of my preparation for hosting the session with Trisha and Iris last night for the Regenerosa project was to go to the project folder. And there have been amazing data kept in the Regenerative Project Incubator. And I'll actually put the link to the Regenerosa in there. There are wonderful documents of you as part of the early ground crew with Joel and Kath and Trisha, and who else was the other one? PJ. And the reason I was spared to put up my hand is because you actually named in that early piece, because there was a point where you were maybe even thinking of going to the OC yourself if your health permitted it, I think, but you actually named specifically British Columbia, what was going on in BC with OSA and with Barichara as a potential trio. And I think telling the story of OSA is a really important one, because it is so different and yet so similar to what is going on with Barichara and British Columbia. And I think that trinity really, it's more than 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's 1 + 1 + 1 to me equals at least 23, and maybe 203, and maybe 2003, and maybe limitless. But I'm really excited because there's so much history and there's so much learning just going back to that project folder and seeing how did the journey unfold, what was the dream. You know, it's only a year since you guys were sitting in a room putting together an amazing proposal that the ER Fund funded, and look what's unfolded through that process. And there's a wonderful comment somewhere that you put together the budget, and then I can't remember the actual wording, but it's like you then get hit by reality. You know, you put your smart budget together for your proposal for funding, and then life happens and it doesn't unfold at all the way you intended, but it unfolds thanks to what you did at that time. It provides the foundation for the next step, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, well said, Claire.
Yeah, I just to put this in there, because but it's thank you for bringing that up, Mitty. That's really important. And just to say, these are what I realize is that these are people who've been often working, knowing what the pitfalls are, but actually not having models of how to do like design new pathways. And so the fact that these it means that they have, oh, bye, Pam. Yeah, the fact that there are these examples, and it really is important to give more of a diversity. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, the other piece is just, we keep going down wrong-headed, like it keeps being, what do you call it? We keep rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, thinking we're doing something different. And to be able to actually steer in a direction that feels like it's actually got the ability to carry this is so powerful. So
Anybody else want to carry on from there, or are we we starting to feel like we're full, or we're reaching a closing? I'm seeing a nod. We can, from here, we can just go around the circle and share how we're feeling. That might take the rest of the time, or if you want to make it brief, we don't have to fill out the time just for the sake of it. Anybody want to start? How you feeling?
Yeah.
Zoe,
Sorry.
please. No, Zoe.
Yeah, I just say that I just find it really inspiring listening to everyone, and it gives me more hope for the future. And I think for me, sometimes I need to slow down and just realize that I'm at the start of a journey, and I can't expect everything to happen straight away. So I have to just slow myself down a bit, and things will happen as they should happen. I think that's what I've taken from this. But yeah, and also mainly inspiration. So thank you.
Well, thank you for stopping by. And I'll go ahead and pass it forward to Bennett, and then Bennett, if you want to pass it forward to somebody when you're finished, please.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for speaking to that, Zoe. It was a good reminder for I'm still like at an early stage in my journey, but that same, just it's always good to be reminded of how you feel when things start out, because like when things get overwhelming and you feel like you might be stuck in a certain place, it's just like, oh no, it's just the next iteration, like maybe a plateau to rest now before things really get rocking and really get cruising. Yeah, so thank you for that. We'll go to Chad. You're looking pensive.
I'm looking at there's a snowfall outside my window here. Yeah, it's actually coming down pretty hard. I feel like I am like I'm looking out ahead, and it's tomorrow, and the snow is still pure, but it's no longer snowing, and I've been basking in the morning sun. Yeah, that's what it feels like. I will pass it to Midi.
Thank you, Chad. Well, what I'm aware of is that somehow being with you all it's a crazy thing to say about being in a Zoom room, but I really feel grounded. Now, having come from the kind of the shakes, the literal and metaphorical shakes, somehow this is really grounded. I loved, there's something for me about recognizing that when Richard Coate speaks or Zoe speaks, I know the land they're in from childhood. I can even travel from, between the two of them. I've driven that road so many times, and there's something about the knowingness at the same time as knowing that I'm in the place I need to be in here in California. So very different. And yet it's the place that I've landed, that I'm here to serve. But I just thank you for grounding me, all of you. Claire.
Thanks, Midi. Yeah, I was realizing how grateful I felt for having a touchstone like this community, that I often feel as if I just personally don't have the skills to be able to do some of this work. And yet, oh my God, thank God I've got, just either the resource of the community to bounce things off of, or a video from Joe, or a video from Bioregional Catalyst, whatever it is that sort of kind of helps to carry something that I can't do on my own. And just sort of really realizing we're in this together, and we've got like kind of like a one-shot chance to make this happen. And we better just work together to the very best of our ability pulling the potential that we have, which is enormous. I mean, that's what I keep feeling when we come together. And when I look back at how far we've progressed, how much more confident I feel, because we couldn't even articulate certain things, but somehow we've been able to just affirm and develop. So yeah, just sort of feeling as if I actually don't exist as just me. I exist as this collective as well. So much gratitude. I will pass to Preston.
That was so beautiful, Claire. That self versus the collective, and it's something we are not very good at here in this culture. We're getting obviously much better at it within this little framework. I want to thank Benji for bringing up Sand Talk and Tyson Yunkaporta, because that was the first time I came to Earth Regenerators. It was the book that was being discussed, and I actually never engaged with the community at that point. I didn't have the skill set, or didn't have that moment in my life yet to take that step forward. I think it was about 3 years ago. So that whether it's now or whether it's later, whether it's here or there, all these things sort of have a way of manifesting, I think, in our lives. And that Tyson Yunkaporta book was it was a pivotal moment that really began to change who I was, to be able to perceive that there was a completely different approach to thinking, to interacting, to talking, to envisioning. And it's since that time that the indigenous philosophies, I don't think you like the reference of indigenous knowledge anymore. It's indigenous philosophy about being and about relations that's critical, that we need to reestablish and exercise and practice, as Jewel likes to say. So that's where I leave off. Thank you.
Well, and I'll leave off briefly just by tying a couple things together that we talked about today. When I shared the David Sloan Wilson interview, the link to it, it's just amazing. In the interview, you see his bookshelf in the background, and on it is Sand Talk. So these worlds are weaving together, Pro-Social and Tyson Yunkaporta, and I'm sure there's many others on his bookshelf that weave in to other things that we discuss as well. And lastly, I just want to say I feel just a slice of home, just a little slice of home, which is really nice for somebody who feels like they've been wandering for a really long time. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Toodles. Have a good day.
Hey,